This is Linda Rosenlund with the Center for Italian Culture at Fitchburg State College. Today is Monday 18th, and we are interviewing Angelini at her home at 36C Notre Dame Street, and it is 45 a.m. Thank you. We've been discussing. You've showed me pictures. Maybe we should start with your dad. You were telling me that he began working on the Clinton Dam when he was only 14. Okay. I'm having problems. Okay, so we're beginning again now. Tell me about your father. He started working on the Clinton Dam when he was only 14?
Right. Yeah, he came to this country in 1902, and he was a water boy at the Clinton Dam. And I found the picture in the Worcester Telegram, and I had it made because I knew that was him, because that's all we ever heard when we were kids, that he was a water boy at the Clinton Dam. Anyway, that was kind of fortunate, and I wish I had found that picture when he was alive, because he could have told us some real nice stories about it.
So that's an interesting story as it is. You're reading the Worcester Telegram one day. I think I saw the date was 2000, year 2000,
yeah.
And you happened to, you drew your attention
to it.
Just an accident
that I ever saw that. Isn't that amazing?
And that you saw this man, this little boy, really, 14, standing with a bucket.
Yeah.
And you looked closer, and it was your dad.
I have a picture of him somewhere here, too, when he was 14, when he came to. Anyway, then after, when he turned, I don't know if it was 18, I don't know what the age was in Italy when they had to serve in the army. Mm-hmm. So we had to go back to Italy and serve in the army. And then after that, he came back to America after he did his thing in the army. You must have read that in the thing. Mm-hmm. About he got 2 cents a day. Oh, by the way, he only made $1.75 a week working at the Clinton Dam.
Clinton Dam.
$1.75 a week. Imagine that.
Let's go back to him, though. Now, is his name Luigi or is it Nuno?
It's Luigi, because we call him Nuno because he's all the kids' grandfathers, you know. Grandfather is Nuno and Nonna.
And where was he from in Italy?
He was from Ascoli-Piceno. I'll spell it out for you if you want.
Okay.
Okay. He came from Piedolama, which is Piedolama. Piedolama. Ascoli-Piceno, Italy.
And how do you spell that?
Ascoli. P-I-C-E, it's 2 words, you know.
Okay.
P-I-C-E-N-O, Italy.
Okay.
And by the way, did you know that the best anisette in the world is made in Ascoli-Piceno?
Now, how did you find that out?
Because I got a bottle of Piceno. Okay, he came here in 1902, and I told you that already. He had to come with a ward because they couldn't come by themselves at that age. And I told you the history about him working with his father when he was 9 years old in Rome. You must have read that in there.
I did, but tell me about it, excuse me, so it'll be...
When he was 9 years old, he went to Rome with his father. They chopped wood, and the 7 hills of Rome, by the way, for a patron. He was a water boy then, even. Can you imagine the poor guy? And anyway, they brought these men in to Rome to chop wood. He had a mule, and he had to go almost a mile to get water. He had 2 leather sacks, which he tied together, and he had to prop them on the side of the mule with a stick because he couldn't lift it. He was so little. Anyway, it was hard to do, and sometimes he would have to dump some water out so he could lift it. It's pretty unbelievable for a 9-year-old boy doing that. They lived mostly on polenta, cornmeal, in case you don't know what polenta is, and occasionally some wild game, rabbits or pheasants that they would catch in the woods. The patron would give them meat, chickens on special occasions, like on Sundays or holidays. Later, when he was 14 years old, he came to America with his father. When his father gave him money for helping him in Rome. And he had to come to America with his father's friend.
Now, did he ever say why his father didn't come to America?
No, he didn't. They remained in Italy, and I don't know why. It's too bad they didn't come to America. They tried to get him here a couple of times, but they never wanted to cross the ocean.
Did your father have any siblings that he talked
Yes,
about?
he had a brother, Peter, and one sister that remained in Italy. She never came here. Oh, yes, and he lived in a farm next to ours up in Boylston.
Okay.
Not too far from us, about a mile. Okay.
Do you know?
Huh?
Do you know who he came with to America?
Yes, his name was. I think his name was Abraham George. I don't know if his first name was Abraham or not, but he was a George, G-O-R-G-I. This was a Georgie family in Leominster. I don't know. You must know.
I don't know them, but so that's G-O-R-G-I.
Yeah. Yeah. I think his first name was Abraham, but I'm not sure. Abraham, it was Abraham. I think. Because there was an Abraham George, and he was married to an aunt of mine, but that was his father anyway.
Now, is this someone who lived in America and went back?
No.
Or no?
He lived in the same town as my father, and he was coming to America, and he had to, my father couldn't come here at that age by himself. He had to come with somebody. And so he was coming to America, then he came with this guy, Mr. George. Oh, well, then, anyway, he lived in Clinton, I guess. He had to have lived in Clinton because he worked in the Clinton Dam at the time.
Did he tell you any of his experiences?
The Clinton Dam?
Yes.
Nothing except that they only made $1.75 a week. And, yeah, the experience was where he had to, he used to buy a can of tuna fish and a loaf of bread for 2 cents, a can of tuna fish for 2 cents, and make his lunch with it all week.
Always fun.
2 cents, imagine that for a loaf of bread.
Did he mention where he was sleeping?
No, but he lived with the Georges that lived, I guess, they must have been in America then because he boarded with them when he was little.
Mention how often he worked? Did he work every day or?
Oh, he must have. He did. He said he used to work so many hours and for only $1.75 a week. And he worked like 70 hours a week.
Wow. It's amazing. So I read in this paper that I think that.
And I gave it to my grandson.
You gave it to your grandson.
He's the one that.
Tell me about the story. Your father loved music. And
yes.
What happened?
Okay. Okay.
You don't have to read it. You can just tell me.
Yeah, but
I
want to read it so that I can get it straight. All right, okay. Out in America, he loved music, and he sent for $1.99 mandolin. And he only made $1.75 a week now. Remember that. At Montgomery Ward. Can you believe Montgomery Ward was in business then? When he was learning to play it, his ward broke the mandolin over his head, which is a true story he used to tell. He said, instead of spending your money on foolishness, and you should be sending it home to your parents. My dad said he cried for a week after that because he only made $1.75 a week, and that's where the loaf of bread cost 2 cents. When he was 16, his dad, he had to go back to Italy to serve in the Army. He served for 3 years and earned 2 cents a day. After stint in the Army, he came back to Clinton, Mass. And worked for 4 years in the Lancaster Mills. Before getting his job in the mills, he went to night school to learn how to read and write English. And everybody in the world knows that Clinton, Mass. was strictly an Irish town. Okay. So now the Irishmen used to gang up on these poor little guys that came from Italy to go to night school. They wanted to learn how to speak English and read and write English. So one night, one of the Italian kids told him not to get near him because, he was going to kill him if he got near him. He had his knife or something like that. My father said. After that incident, anyway, they never bothered my father and this little guy again that he used to go to night school with.
Did he ever tell you any stories about going to school?
He never went to school. In Italy, he went to only the 2nd grade. Can you believe that? He only had
Those were tough.
2 years. Yeah, he could write. I can't believe how smart a person is with no schooling. And when he came to America, he had to learn how to write, read and write English, because, it isn't like these other people that they think that just because they're Spanish, they don't have to learn and read and write English. But everyone had to learn and read and write English in them days.
Did he ever talk to you about just learning English?
Yeah.
Did he
Well, he just learned by, going to night school in Clinton. And that's the only education he had. Yet, my father was a crack shot with a gun. We lived on a farm, right? So he was an electrician. He wired everything in the cider mill and all that stuff. He did all these things that people that went to college don't even know how to do.
Now, you talked about him using a gun. Did he hunt on the farm?
Oh, of course he did. Of course he did. Shot rabbits. Shot a fox in the chicken coop one time because they were eating the chickens. And stuff like that, He was an amazing man, my dad. I can't brag enough about him. You can't believe.
So he's back from Italy, and he's working in the Lancaster mill.
Yes.
Learning how to speak English.
Yep.
And then, is that when he meets your mother? Does he meet
No, he met my mother in Italy when he was there, serving in the... He lived in the same hometown as my mother in Italy. He knew her all since he was a kid. And he sent for her, and they got married in Boston. She couldn't get off the boat, until he had to go on the boat They got married by proxy, and then he had to go on the boat, and the captain had to marry them again before she could get off the boat. My poor mother said, all the way from Italy coming over here in the boat.
Now, how old was she when she came here?
She was 24. They got married. No, she was 25 because they were 25 when they got married. Now, that's old for Italian people, believe me.
Did she ever talk about that, waiting for your father? And
they used to write to each other all the time. They corresponded in Italian. My father could write and read in Italian, and he did, he only had... My father said that if you go to the 5th grade in Italy, it's like going to a junior high or high school in America.
But yet, he only went to 2nd grade. I wonder how he learned.
Yes, but he still learned how to read and write.
Wonder how.
Other parents must have taught him something growing up. My mother's family was a smart one. I had an Uncle Joe that was very smart.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Leone, L-E-O. And my parents were, they had like a shop that they retained chairs. And her father was like a cavalier or something, I don't know, like a policeman, for mother's father. Was Leone.
So did she ever talk to you about well, she must have talked about the passage over to New York.
Oh,
because she
it was
so
very
sick.
sad. She said she was sick all the way over. And then every time my father used to mention Martin to go back to Italy for a visit, she said, if you go, you're going alone. I'll never cross the ocean again.
Now, did she travel with anyone or by herself?
No, Mrs. Perla was one of the ladies from Leominster here that was on the boat. And another lady by the name of Fanari, Mrs. Fanari, that lived in Leominster here also. She was on the same boat as my mother.
Now, were these two women also married by proxy and sent over?
I don't know if they had husbands here or if they just came to America. I don't know any of their life history.
And they were from the same town?
Yeah. So they all came in the same boat with my mother. Anyway, that's the story.
So then your father met your mother on the boat, married her again?
Yeah, he had to go on the boat before they would let her off the boat. Yeah. And then they spent the night in Boston with these people. Their last name was Piccolini. There were people in America that they knew, and that's where my father went to wait for my mother to get off the boat. And so they went with them on the boat, as what you have to, like a bridesmaid or whatever you call it.
A witness?
Yeah, a witness. Yeah, with them. And they spent the night in Boston, and then he came to Clinton, where he was living in Clinton. He was boarding up in the acre with the Georges still. Well, anyway, then my mother came. They had gotten an apartment.
Mm-hmm. So your mother came into Boston, not New York?
No, Boston.
Now, the Piccolomini, is that the family that ends up moving?
No, they're the people that lived in Boston. They still, well, to this day, live there. But they had family in Leominster also. Because you don't know anything about Leominster, so
I know a little bit.
Yeah, because the Piccolomini's that the people in Boston were related to. Oh God, he became such an important guy in Boston. This man, he had big bucks. He was almost like a millionaire later on in years.
Mm-hmm.
But they owned a block in Clinton, a whole block, of homes. That Piccolomini guy, and his aunt. Like I said, you don't know anybody, but his aunt, her daughter married a DePoli, who was a policeman in Leominster. And I think she's in a nursing home now. She's about 90-something.
Mm-hmm.
Daughter of the lady that, the Piccolomini that my mother stayed with in Boston. But the lady that moved here was his sister.
Now, what about Father Rocco Piccolomini?
He's not, yeah. That's a different Piccolomini family, but they're all related one way or another. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, your parents are living in Clinton with the Georges. How did they end up buying a farm in Boylston?
Oh, yes. Well, my father liked that part of the country because, he worked in the dam and he loved that area. And so there was this farm for sale, had no electricity, an outhouse, no bathrooms, nothing like that. Had a pump, a copper pump. I mean, we used to polish it up all the time in the house, just to pump the water. And what else? And a well, and stuff like that. But later on, if you ever saw the farm today, you would be amazed. Still there,
Where is it located?
It's in Boylston, Mass. It's I don't know if you ever heard of Mile Hill Road on Route 70 into Clinton. Mm-hmm. There's Mile Hill Road, and my father's farm is on the highest point in Massachusetts. Do you know that?
No.
You look down on the Wachusett Reservoir from there. From the reservoir. My brother built the house, and from his back window you could see the reservoir from.
That's
beautiful.
House.
Yeah, it is beautiful up there. Beautiful countryside. Yeah. Anyway, my sister Nina still lives on the farm. And her kids. Yeah. My brothers all built homes up there because my father had like 35 acres and kind of split it up with the kids, and they built homes like 3 brothers. Mm-hmm. All built homes up there.
I think so. I think it says
Boylston. Oh, well, he bought the farm in Boylston in 1916.
Okay.
My sister Mary was born in 1914, and my sister Rose was born in Clinton, and my sister Mary was born in Clinton. So in 1916, they moved on the farm because my sister Liz Down were all born on the farm. So that was 9 of us, all born on the farm. The guy came up in the horse and buggy, delivered every one of us. Dr. Abbott from Clinton delivered all the farmers that lived up my way because one of the kids was named after the doctor.
Really?
He named his son after the Dr. Abbott. His name was Roger Abbott. And then every one of us were born on the farm except Mary and Rose. They were born in Clinton.
So how long did your mother and father live in Clinton together?
From 1916, they were on the farm, and they were there only 2 years.
2 years
before they bought the farm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. See, she had boarders. My mother, she had boarders, and she used to cook.
And they lived in Clinton.
Yeah, because my sister Mary was a baby, and one of the boarders was Uncle Nick. Imagine that. I married one of the guys that was my mother's was the father of one of my mother's boarders.
You married?
Yeah, Rocky. My husband Rocky's father was one of the boarders of my mother's boarders.
Now who?
Him and his whole family. There was Uncle Nick and Uncle Nick and Uncle Armand, and and their father. There was 4 that boarded with my mother from that family. And then I married the grandson of one of them.
Wow. The grandson or the son?
I married the son of one of the, but the grandfather was here also. His
Really?
grandfather.
Now this is the Angelini family? Yeah. Now is that a family?
I don't know much of their history, but all I know is that when they came to this country, they boarded with my mother. The 4 of those Angelinis, the father and 3 sons.
Did your mother talk about what it was like having boarders?
Oh, did she ever? She said it was so hard. She used to cook and clean. And one morning she used to make their lunches, and one morning one of the boarders took my father's lunch, and he got stuck with the boarder's lunch.
So I take it it's different.
It was different. And every time this guy used to see my father, to the day that before he even died, when he come to Leominster, my dad, this guy would always remind him, because I guess he moved to Leominster then. Mm-hmm. He would always remind him, was my lunch good? He used to always tell him to him. They used to always kid around about that. Yeah, they had quite a history, my mother and father. They're beautiful people. And, they were the kind of people that never questioned. We were 11 kids, for God's sakes. Not once did my mother and father ever say, where you been, or what time did you get home last night, anything. Never did they ever question us, ever, about where we went or what time we came back or anything. We never, got the 3rd degree. And so one lady one time says to my mother, how can you trust your kids, because we came to Leominster after my sister Rose got married. We come down and stayed with her, like a board with her. So how can you trust your kids in Leominster if you can't see what they're doing? And my mother told them, she said, if my kids are like me, I don't have to worry about them.
Hmm. So what was it like growing up on the farm?
It was wonderful. We only had each other. So we're a very close family. You can ask Ann Mazzaferro, she'll tell you how close we are.
Because Ann,
my God.
Her husband's sister married your brother?
No, her husband's brother married my sister, Anita. She was only 59, my sister Anita. It was wonderful growing up on the farm, a typical day on the farm. Oh, God. Well, we all went to school. We all worked hard. Nobody ever complained about working on the farm. Nobody ever said, gee, I don't want to do that, or, do I have to, or anything like that. Ever. Nobody ever made any kind of a comment about what we had to do. We just did it. We just did everything that we had to do. I tell you, I had the most wonderful parents. Nobody ever got a licking or anything. Oh, we got a call down now and then. Maybe a backhander once in a while because we didn't do something right. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, I tell you, I had the most wonderful family. And, well, I don't know. We all played games. My father used to play games, and like we used matchsticks or, 51 and stuff like that because we had nothing else. We were born and brought up during the Depression. And so help me, if we didn't live on a farm, I don't think. My father used to bring gallons of milk down to my aunts in Clinton and their kids. Ricotta, cheese, eggs. We had everything you could want to eat on the farm. Had no money, but we had everything. The only thing my father ever bought was salt, pepper, flour to make bread, and stuff like that. We never had anything, but we always ate good. My mother put up you name it, and she put it up in jars, tomatoes and peaches. And I don't remember what peaches taste like with cream on them. We had whipped cream on everything, and I don't know what oatmeal tastes like unless it had cream in it instead of milk. My mother would make a big bowl of oatmeal in the morning and stuff like that. We were well fed, even if we weren't, didn't have any money, but we were well fed. Plus, you can ask anybody in Leominster or Clinton about my dad and how good he was to everybody. We shared everything in our day. Today you don't even know who your neighbor is, for God's sakes. Mm-hmm. Shared everything, honest to God. We had a wonderful, wonderful life and wonderful family. Oh, my God, I still do.
You make your cheese?
I make cheese, like my dad used to make. I make cheese. My nephew still makes, when you slaughter a pig, he makes the prosciutto. You know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
It's that expensive meat. My father always made prosciuttos. We made sausage. When they slaughter a pig in the fall, you had the meat. Then we had a farmer that when he'd kill a calf, my father would like buy a quarter of the calf or something like that. Well, anyway, we were well fed. Like I said, we had no money, but we ate well.
Now,
Plus, my father, every time he came to Leominster, there was a couple of ladies who were widows, and he'd bring stuff down to them. You can ask anyone. I don't know if you ever heard of the Spatchapolis, but yeah. Well, I got to tell you about them. You ask any of the Spatchapolis about my father and our family, and you listen to what they don't make people like that anymore. I'll tell you right now, Linda.
Now, how they have a connection to Leominster?
How did he have? Because the people that lived in Boston there, the Pickle Ninnies. As a matter of fact, Mr. DePoli is my godfather. As a matter of fact, we have a lot of Leominster people. Mr. Valeri was baptized, one of my sisters. And at Mrs. George, that was my uncle's sister that married a George guy, that my father came over with his grandfather, whoever he was, I don't know. But anyway, they all had, they were all, and then that lady, Mrs. Perler, that came here, she came to Leominster, they came over in the boat with my mother. So they had a lot in common with these people. They came from the next town to where my mother and father lived in Italy. Most all those Leominster people.
Do you know what town that was? Or?
It was Ascoli Piceni also, but see, my father came. Did I say the name of his town?
Piedmola.
Kidalama, and they came from Pedari, which is Petare. That's the name of the town they came from. The people in Leominster, which was like Fitchburg and Leominster, and they used to argue all the time, my father said. There used to always be arguments like Fitchburg and Leominster, always competing.
This connection with these people.
Yeah, with the Leominster people. That's how, all came about. And then the Mazzaferras, how we got acquainted with them is my sister Nita married, Ann's husband's brother.
What was his name?
Joe. Joe Mazzaferro. And their aunt lived their sister lived in Worcester, Mrs. Beventi, the builder that built all these beautiful homes and stuff. Yeah, he built my nephew's home. I got to show you a picture of it.
Okay.
No, it's in here, I think.
So what the connection was with the Bevenzis?
That was Aldo's sister. Aldo's sister, the Bevenzis.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Oh, here it is. This is my nephew's house. He's got it at the top of the hill here. At the top of, it used to be the ski toe in Leominster.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
and
his house.
And this was his house?
Yeah, the Bevenzis built that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful.
Very
Do you know from his house, you can see the Walmart in Fitchburg, like it was across the street. It is just beautiful. You just put up a 60-foot flagpole, as you can see from all over Leominster almost.
Wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Now,
place.
what's his name?
His name is John Cassini. That's my sister Babe.
Babe.
Oh, I don't know much of anything else. That's
Well,
it.
sure you do. So your father, he would come, I was wondering, I think Peter told me that he worked on the farm for a while.
Who?
Peter did. Your father's farm.
Peter who?
Spatchapolis.
Oh, how do you know him?
I just interviewed him last week, him and his wife.
Oh, well, this is the young generation, that you're talking to, Peter. Now, if you talk to his uncles, like Marty and them, then you'd know, that yes, he did work in the farm, not Peter, but his father. Peter's father, Mariko, he died.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think his mother is still living. I think she lives up here in one of these, something living. He's not the redhead, is he? Has he got a brother that's a redhead?
I don't know. But Peter,
you're talking about Peter. Oh, you're talking about Peter Spatchapolis. Okay, and he's got a brother Marty. Okay, it's his mother that was the widow that my dad used to bring stuff to. Mm-hmm. And those kids did. They worked on the farm. His brother, Mariko, mostly. Peter, I don't remember Peter. He was a younger He's the younger one.
He's the youngest.
Yeah, he's the baby of the family. There's only a couple left in that family, you know. It's him and Marty and a sister in New Jersey. Only 3 out of a family of 9. Oh, yeah, we were close with the Spatucolis, I'll tell you. They used to come up the farm all the time. They didn't work on my farm. They worked on my uncle's farm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Work there and then sleep there and
yeah, yeah. And get fed there and stuff. Nice people.
So it sounds like you're so proud of your father.
And my mother. They were beautiful people. He loved music, and he used to have. There was a band. There was a bunch of people, men in Clinton that used to play the violin, and so he used on Sunday morning. They used to come up the farm to practice. That's how much my father loved music. You know, speaking of that, when I was just down here getting my blood pressure, I played the piano down there. None of us kids ever took lessons except my sister Mary. She took violin lessons, and she's the only one in the family that can't play an instrument. Everybody in our family is musically inclined. My brother Pat played the accordion, I did too. My brother Johnny played the trumpet. Another brother played and we all played the piano, only by ear, but we still played. And we just was a musical, happy family. And every time we used to go somewhere, everybody used to always want to come with us because we always had the most fun, it seems as though, every place we went. Had wonderful lives, all of us. Jesus, I can't believe that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of us are in our 80s already. My oldest sister, Rose, is 86. Liz is going to be 85 the end of this month. My sister Nita that died in Mazafaro, she's not living. And I'm next. I'm the 5th in the family. That's why my name is, Quintina here.
I was going to ask you. That's why they named you Quintina?
Yeah, my aunt named me, and I was so mad about that name. I said to my mother, why do you have to name me a number when you had so many beautiful names? She had a sister named Delita. I said, why don't you name me a pretty name like that? She says, well, your aunt named you. She says, what are you going to do? She said, she's the 5th. Why don't you name her Quintina? Well, okay, that's what I got.
Quinty is pretty.
Oh, that's lovely.
How did you get clothed and shoed on the farm? What was
Well, we went pretty barefoot in the summer, I'll tell you. The minute we got out of school, off came the shoes. Then my mother used to go and buy shoes for everybody before we started school. Yeah. And I was the 5th daughter, all right? Mary, Rose, Liz, Anita, and me. I was the 5th daughter, so you can imagine how many new things I ever got. Call me secondhand Rose. I kid my sisters about that today. They take a fit of laughing. Secondhand Rose. Everything was handed down to me. Good thing one of my sisters is kind of bigger than me, because I was always kind of tiny when I was little. Used to call me Potato. Some Mr. Capone here in Leominster gave me that nickname when I was little.
What was it?
It was like small potato in Italian. Padanello, they used to call me.
Did it stick?
My father used to call me that all the time.
Yeah.
Because I was always so small, but I fooled everybody because I should stick.
No. You're hardly fat.
Oh, geez, I get unbuttoned. The reason why I got these awful clothes on is because when they take your blood pressure, you have to roll your sleeve up.
Well, it looks fine. Let me just fix it here.
Geez, we didn't have all this on tape, too.
Oh, well.
All this gabbing I've been doing on tape.
It's not gabbing. This is part of the interview. You're very interesting. You don't feel that way? You have a lot to share.
Well, I don't know what else I can tell you, honey.
So tell me about working on the farm, though. Did you and
We
your
all
brothers,
worked very hard on the farm, very hard. In the fall, we used to wake up real early before we went to school and went and picked up apples. My father would, buy orchards, and we'd pick up apples from the ground and put them in sacks. And my father had a cider mill, and he made cider. I'll tell you a funny story about cider. One day, this Italian lady from Clinton called up. See, all the Italians made their own wine, right? So now my father made the most delicious cider wine that tastes like champagne, honest to God. It was very good. It tastes like white Zinfandel, if you ever had that. That's what it tastes like. So anyway, one day, this lady called up from Clinton, and she's talking in Italian. And she says, is your father there and all that? So I said to my father, Pa, she wants to talk to you. He says, you talk because I can't understand. I said, she's talking Italian. She wants to talk to you. So he gets on the phone, and she must have said, who's this? Because he says, this is myself. Who's you? Anyway, she wanted him to make her some cider so she could mix it in with the grapes, the refuge from the grapes, and they used to make cider wine out of that, which was, I tell you, it tastes just like white Zinfandel. It was so good. We never drank. Would you believe my father always had wine in the house? We never drank wine. Only when we had a cold, he'd heat it up and put sugar in it and make us drink it. Had their own fuel-alls.
They really didn't drink wine in the house? Your parents and you? Not even?
My father did, yes. My mother couldn't even have a glass of wine. Every time she did, she'd get rosy cheeks, and she'd get really kind of silly, which she did a couple of times. My mother never drank. Nobody in our family drank, tell you the truth.
So did he sell the cider and the wine that he made?
No, it was only for our own use. We had there was this man, Dan O'Connell, that lived on the farm, and he was like, he was kind of like an Irish bum. Every time he'd get his pension check, he'd be drunk for 3 or 4 weeks, and my father used to go pick him up out of the gutter and bring him back up the farm. He lived with us. Now, he's the only grandfather we ever knew. His name was Dan O'Connell. He wasn't even Italian. But he taught us so many little ditty songs and stuff. He was the best guy.
Do you remember?
And my mother used to cut his hair and do everything. He was like part of our family growing up. Dan, old man Dan. And he used to drink the cider wine. My father would give him a bottle, he'd go out in the field, and he'd be hoeing all day and working out in the farm. And he had that. And that was, no money. That was his pay. He lived with us. My mother fed him good. He ate good and slept good. Took good care of him.
So did he sort of come with the farm? Was he there when
No. This was later on in years.
Do you remember any of the little ditties that he taught you?
Oh, yes, but I'm not going to sing it.
Why not?
Because it's stupid. We had more laughs and more fun with him. And then when my sister Rose was going out with her husband, he used to come up the farm to visit. And he used to get the biggest kick out of Dan because he used to tell stories. He was in 38 of the states of, at that time there was only 48 states in the Union, and he was in 38 of those states. He used to like travel around with a carnival and stuff like that, and help them set up the tents and all that. Yeah. He took my brother Medio when he was 9 years old to the World's Fair in New York one time. This Dan, very well educated and traveled guy, but he was an old bachelor and never got married.
Did you have your own job that you were supposed to do on the farm? Your own chore?
Well, more or less. My sister Nita liked doing the house stuff, and I hated that stuff. I hated, cleaning house, and I used to always rather go out in the field and out in the yard and do the outside work. I used to love that. Always. I used to lead the horse for my father when he plowed. Yeah, I used to sit on top of the horse. Oh, God. Did so many things when we were young. Milk cows, shoveled manure, pitched hay. We did things that kids today wouldn't even know what those jobs are. Like, they asked one kid where the milk came from. She said from the supermarket. I mean, when the kid doesn't even know milk comes from a cow. My father made cheese every day because we had 2 cows and had a lot of milk and a lot of cream. And he left the cream in the milk when he made the cheese. It was so rich. The ricotta, he made ricotta also. After you make cheese, you make the ricotta. Comes after the cheese. That's why there's no calories hardly in the ricotta. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, too bad I didn't make some cheese and you could have had some.
Tell me about the process of making cheese. What kind did he usually make? What was your favorite?
He only made one kind.
What?
Just a regular, it looked like farmer's cheese, and he had this wooden mold, and after he took it out of the kettle, he put it in there and squish all the water out of it. I taught Peter how to make it. He came up my house, and I taught him how to make homemade cheese, by the way, Peter Spatch.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, I taught him how to make it. All the people in Leominster love that cheese. He used to come down, and a lot of them, were diabetic and stuff, so they didn't want any salt or anything on it. They used to love my father's cheese. You can ask anybody on Lincoln Terrace, and they'll tell you how good my father. I even make it for church sometimes when we have things at church.
What does the mold look like? Is it?
Well, I use a plastic one because I can't find the wooden mold anymore. My father made his own. He'd take a piece of, like a shingle, a thin piece of wood. Well, it wasn't that thin, really. It was about a quarter of an inch thick. And he'd soak it in water for I don't know how long, and then keep bending it until he got a circle, and then he'd tie like a string around it. And he made his own mold. He had a couple. I'm sorry my sister and I never threw those molds away. How sad that is because, well, they figured who needs them now, So now, well, if you want me to show you what I got when I make my cheese, I make it after. Okay.
So, but tell
I
me
make my own homemade pasta. I'll show you that too. My gnocchi, my raviolis. I'm old school, honey, and I don't have anything. Not once in all my married years. I was married 56 years before my husband died, and not once did he ever not have a Sunday that he didn't have something homemade either.
Really a lost art nowadays.
Yeah. Now everything, you go out in the store and buy everything, bring it home for supper.
So tell me again, explain to me how you make cheese.
Well, first of all, you got to get it's the best is whole milk, and my nephew gets it from a farm, and he still lives on the farm, right? My sister Nina lives on the farm still. Same farm I was born and brought up in. Has wooden pegs in the barn still. The farm is over 300 years old. Anyway, he gets the whole milk, but I just get the homogenized milk because I don't know anybody. I'll tell you who gave me some whole milk one time. This kid that was running for mayor of Woodward here in Leominster. Anyway, he lives up on a farm somewhere up Pleasant Street or someplace, I don't know where. Prospect Street, I think. Anyway, this guy knows he had calves or something at his house, and he went and get milk from the farm up in Lunenburg, and he brought me 2 gallons of whole milk, so I made cheese with them. I had to make them for the camp because I make them, my sister's own camps up in Vernon Pond. So I make the cheese and I make fringies. I don't know if you know what those are. It's that thin pasta that you fry and then you put powdered sugar on it. It's pasta dough.
Okay.
Yeah. And you iron it out really thin as you can, or roll it out as thin as you can, and you cut it and you fry it, and it kind of bubbles up with bubbles on it, and then you put powdered sugar on it. Everybody's crazy about those too.
And what are they called?
I call them fringies. I don't know what the name of them is. A lot of people call them foyers or something like that, which means leaves in Italian. Foyers. How do you like my oak leaf up there? Well, it's shrunk now because it's dried up, but it was so humongous when it was green. I said, I got to save it. The other one is a normal size, right?
Yeah, they're very big. So getting back to the cheese, you get the whole milk, then what happens?
Yes, and then you take a couple of junket tablets, and you put them in there, and you wait till it gets all gelled, like junket. Have you ever had junket? Oh,
what is junket?
They sell it in the store, for God's sake. It's like a pudding. It gets all like a pudding. I get deaf, my God. How old are you anyway?
41.
I think your grandchildren almost that old. Anyway. So, and then you put it until it gets gelled. Then you put it back on the stove and you heat, or you got to heat the milk to like lukewarm. And then you mix the junket, put it in there, and swish it around, and then you let it set for about an hour and a half, whatever, and it gets into this like gel. Junket, that's what it turns into. Then after that, you take a whisk, whatever. My father used to have a wooden prong, like a stick that had 3 prongs on it, and I had one. I just threw the damn thing away. I didn't like that part on my cheese. So I used a whisk. I whisked it all up, and then I let it get heated up to a certain degree so that you can't hold your hands in there and it gets that hot. And you keep forming. These things are like all little curds, and you keep forming it until it makes one big lump of cheese. And then I take it out of the pan and put it in the mold and then squeeze all the whey out of it. And after that, there's not much you can do. And then later on I put salt on it after I get it all down to put a little salt. Otherwise it tastes like big nothing.
Without the salt?
Just tastes like milk, you know. And then after, I don't make, I don't have enough that much. I do it with a gallon of milk, I make it. And I'll show you the form after that I make it in. It was only the top of a plastic container. And I had my husband cut it so that,
Now, what did your father use? You said junket.
At first, before junket tablets came into use, but later on my mother got the junket tablets. But do you know what they used to curdle the milk with? You'll be amazed. When a calf was born and they slaughtered a calf, they took the belly from the calf that had the milk, fresh milk in there, and they'd hang that up to dry. And when that was dry, they'd cut a little piece off and put it in a piece of cloth, like, and squeeze that into the milk. You know, they'd soak it, like, in the milk, and squeeze it, and that used to curdle the milk. Can you believe that? We used to do that when we were kids for my mother. You know, we used to do that. And my mother used to make, like, she'd have about 3 gallons, 4 or 5 gallons of milk in this big, like a cannon thing. That's how big hers was. One time she's making, the priest came to take the census one time. You Catholic? Came up the farm to take the census one day. And my mother was, I don't know, but that day she had one of the biggest cheeses. She could hardly lift it out of the kettle, okay? Now the priest is hanging over her watching every move. And she told him to back up a little bit because when she lifted it up, you know, because in them days they had the wood stove. When she lifted it up and put it in the form, it kind of splattered and, you know, made beads on the stove. And he was getting splashed with this. And she told him to back up a little bit, you know. And she was so embarrassed because she could hardly lift the cheese out, and he was watching every move she made. But he was so amazed watching her do that.
Now, how do you make the ricotta?
And then afterwards, you put that whey back on the stove, and you get a glass of cold water and keep it on the side. And when that whey comes, all those little flakes come up to the top of the kettle. And now, when they float up to the top, and before it cracks, it cracks open, it's going to start boiling. You pour the water in that crack there, the cold water, to stop it from cooking. You shut the stove off while I have gas. But my mother used to just take the kettle off the stove. And anyway, and then you take a sieve and you scoop up all that top, and that's ricotta. And then you see that has all the calories already in the cheese. And what you have left is the whey mostly, which has no calories hardly. Ricotta has less calories than cream cheese, cottage cheese, or any of that stuff. Did you know that ricotta had less calories than cottage cheese?
No, you still make that? Do you still make
Yes, I don't make the ricotta, though. I don't have enough milk. I only do a gallon, and I make a cheese about this big and round. Yeah, that's the story.
So did all the girls in the family help with the cooking?
Oh, everybody helped do everything. We all learned how to make cheese. We all learned all these things that
So the boys
kids.
too?
Oh, yes. My brother Emilio still does the cheese and stuff.
So any distinction on the farm as far as a boy job?
Oh, the boys mostly milk the cows, but the girls milked them before the boys. See, boys all came after me. My father had 5 girls in a row, and then the boys came. 3 in a row. My father was so proud he's going to do 5 and 5, you know. He got fooled. And then 3 more sisters. So it's 5, 3, and 4, and 3.
Now, did your mother speak English?
Oh, beautiful English. And my father, too. My father and mother both, they always talked to us in English. They hardly ever talked to us in Italian. I'm sorry that I didn't learn more Italian and learn to read and write. I can read it, more or less. I can't write it too good, although there's some people in Italy, that my sister's mother-in-law and them, we used to send them Christmas cards, and I used to write it the way it sounded, and they could figure it out. Mm-hmm. They figured it out all right. Really? They knew what I was saying.
So your parents primarily spoke English?
Mostly. And, no, to each other, and at home they spoke Italian also. We all could speak Italian and everything, but they knew English better than most of my aunts and uncles in Clinton. They got all those aunts and uncles and everything. All the Italians were there, and they always conversed in Italian. Well, we lived on the farm, and my father, like I told you, was the only Italian family in Boylston. And so we had to speak English when we went to that.
So did you have much outside contact with the people of Boylston?
Oh, all the time. We did everything with them, except we couldn't go to their church because, you know, that was Protestant church up there. Mm-hmm. But we went to school with all these people, all these kids, and there's pictures of us in like a mouse. Talk about little.
Mm-hmm. Mention ever that there's an Italian?
No, we got along fine with all the people in Boylston. We never, the only ones that was when my dad first came to this country and lived in Clinton, it was strictly Irish, and they thought they owned the whole country, you know. So, outside of that, my father and mother in Boylston, God, they were very well liked.
Sell produce from the farm?
Oh, yes. My father used to even go to Boston once in a great while, mostly to Worcester. They had like a place right behind City Hall. There was like the farmer's market or something there. Yeah, many years ago. And, you know, he used to get up like 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd set the alarm, or even earlier, so he could get a spot there with his truck. And when we went there, we used to fight over who was going to go with them, who would wake up. And anyway, he'd tell us to be really quiet. Like he'd pick one of us to go with him. And guess what we went for? Just for that cup of coffee and that donut. As soon as the place opened up, about 7 o'clock, he'd go over and get a cup of coffee and donut for us. And that's what we used to want to go with him for, just for that. Oh, God.
Was education important to your family?
Oh, very. This is the 4th and 5th grade, I think, here.
Where, here?
And there's ugly me right there, that little, I look like a mouse.
You think so?
Oh, ugly.
I don't think so.
Oh, my.
Were you the largest family in town?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of those people who only had 3 or 4 kids in each family. One girl, this one girl that I went to school with, she was an only child. I think her mother and father had her after they had to change their life because her parents were like old. Mm-hmm. You know. Andrews, her name was. Yeah, we had a wonderful bringing up and wonderful life. My mother and father were the most wonderful people.
So you said education was important to them?
Oh, yeah. But see, my sister Rose went, she was almost ready to graduate. I think she quit school 3 weeks before she graduated to come to work in Leominster. Times were really hard. This was depression, and there wasn't a damn penny around. Couldn't get a job nowhere. That's why we came to Leominster to work, mostly. Because they had plastic shops here. And in Clinton, they had that doll shop in them, but, Jesus, all the Irishmen had them jobs. Mm-hmm. And we were lucky to work. But although I worked in Eastern Isles later on in life, this is when I was older.
So did you and some of your brothers and sisters come to Leominster to work?
Yeah, we all did. Mm-hmm. Not my brothers. None of my brothers came. My sister, Rose, came. She worked in, they owned the factory that they worked in, the Renzi Plastics. Mm-hmm. That used to be the Great American Novelty, and that's when my sister Rose started working when she first came to Leominster. And they boarded with that Mrs. George on Lincoln Terrace. Well, we knew everybody on Lincoln Terrace in them days anyway.
What was Lincoln Terrace like?
All Italians, strictly. Lincoln Terrace used to be all French years ago. They all moved out and moved up on French Hill. And then later on, the Italians kept moving in, and so everybody on the street was Italian except one family, and they were Irish on the end of the street. I think that Hilda, her name was. Anyway, ever since that time.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
now, would you believe it's all going back to the French? There's a lot of French families up there again. The guy next door, Cormier, and LeBlanc, and I don't know how many others. But there's very few Italians left on Lincoln Terrace, I'll tell you. Just the original ones that handed their houses down to their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's moved out, mostly.
So it was a close-knit place?
More or less. They had wonderful times up there. They had the Saladini Hall. Used to have St. Marco feasts and everything. Mm-hmm. We used to march church and all that stuff. Fun time.
Did your parents think that religion was important too?
Oh, yes. My father was an altar boy in Italy.
Was he?
He got a licking from his mother because one day they went and picked grapes instead of serving Mass, and the priest told my mother that he didn't serve Mass, so he got a licking for that. Mm. He told his mother, my grandmother.
How did your parents...
You know, one time, see, my father really didn't get to church. The Holy Rosary in Clinton was our church, because they had no... Catholic Church in Boylston at the time when we were young. We were baptized, married, communion, confirmation, everything, all in the Holy Rosary Church in Clinton. All my sisters and brothers, all of us.
So you wouldn't go to church during the
week? Oh, no. And my brother Pat and I, we'd get out of school and walk 3 miles to where our house was from the school, plus 3 miles down to the church. That was 6 miles. To go to catechism.
How often?
Once a week to go to catechism so that we could make our communion and confirmation. Would you believe we made our communion and confirmation together? I was 11 years old when I made both together, because that's when the guy came. And then the priest used to come to our house and do things too, because when we couldn't go to church, we used to come up and have catechism up to my house.
Whole class with all those kids.
Yeah. He did, more or less. One time he had a flat tire. He was so wonderful. Father Leary, his name was. And my brother helped him. My father would give him a glass of wine every time.
And this was the pastor from the Clinton Church?
Yes. Mm-hmm. From the Holy Rosary.
So tell me more about your time in Leominster, though. I'm wondering, how did you get the...
I stayed with my sister Rose because she was married by that time. Mm. My sister Anita Mazzaferro and myself, we stayed at my sister Rose's. And we worked at the Great American Novelty. Yeah.
What were you doing for them?
Laying. Always had black. The cracks in my hands were always black. My fingernails were always black. But I used to spray Mickey Mouses, if you don't mind. Thousands of them. Millions of them. I used to spray, put the little Mickey Mouse in there and spray it. You know how it's all black like that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my job. Then another thing I did, another job I did in American Novelty was pinwheels. You know, you used to fold it, 3 corners in there, and then staple it with a nail that goes in the middle, and then they'd spin around. Yeah, we used to do that, too. The only 2 jobs I can remember, that's how I met my husband, too. He worked downstairs in the molding room. My sister Liz used to say, he's a nice guy, why don't you go out with him? I said, no, because I don't want to go out with him. First of all, he didn't dance, and that was all the question. Everybody in my family dances. Beautiful dancers. My brother Pat and I, we won prizes all the time dancing. Anyway. But he played in the band. He played the saxophone in the band, which was nice.
About you and your brother winning?
Oh, we won contests like in Boylston. Hardly anybody in Boylston could dance. We taught more kids how to dance and wore out more rugs in our house. My father loved the house full of people and singing and laughing.
Mm-hmm. So did he teach you how to?
Always had a piano in our house. My father, well, he was a good dancer, my father. I used to rather dance with him than some of the guys at weddings and things kept perfect time.
Mm-hmm.
He's only a little guy. And he liked to sing, too, because I have more pictures. Every wedding we had, my father singing on the microphone.
Really?
On Lincoln Terrace.
Lincoln Terrace. And were you expected to marry an Italian man?
No, my brother's married Irish. Medio married Renzi. My brother Medio married an Italian girl, who just died, by the way, last fall. Anyway, and my brother Pat married Dolly Mahan, and my brother John, he's in Florida right now. They have a place in Fort Lauderdale. And he married a girl, Marguerite Coonan. Irish, what a sweetheart of a girl she is.
Now, was your husband when you met him?
Yeah, because we used to walk to work together more. Not together with him, but everybody walked to work at that time. He was working in the same shop.
Leominster was back then.
But
well,
should ask the people that were born and brought up in Leominster. I wasn't.
But especially compared to Boylston.
Oh, it was more like a city than. And Boylston was just farm country. We lived almost a mile from our neighbors, although we were always skated with them. We'd slid. We had a hill by our house that you could. We'd get on the toboggan and we'd go. I bet you almost a mile before we'd come to a stop. It was the walking back that used to kill me. So we'd go down 2 different hills with that toboggan.
Mm. Now, when you moved away from the farm and lived in Leominster, who took over your farm?
Well, the boys were still on the farm. Well, we were still on the farm. We'd go home weekends all the time until after we got married. And then my father really didn't plant that much anymore. Again, boys all built homes up there, and they used to help out. But my father, every year my mother used to say, they don't plant so much this year. Don't plant so much. Seems as if you always find a little extra to plant, and I don't know why. I don't know if that's your bracelet. Is that one of them holy things?
No, not this one. No. So were you expected to send your money home or bring your money
That's
home?
another thing. My mother and father never took 10 cents from us kids. We only made $10 or $12 a week when we worked in these shops, if we were lucky. And so by the time, you paid for your expenses and stuff, they never questioned, if you had to buy something, and we'd give some money sometimes. But my mother never spent any of our money. Like when my brothers worked, she used to put their money away all the time and gave it to them, when they got married and stuff. They never took it. See, my parents were so giving, and they never took anything from us. We never paid board. We never, like most of the kids on Lincoln Terrace, had to turn everything in. Their mother used to give them a quarter to spend for the week.
It was a little different, though, because your family could feed you. You had all your
but
food.
it isn't that so much. But my dad never expected money from any of us, it seemed as though. Especially when we went. We never paid any kind of board or anything like that. Oh, my God. You mean to say it's 12 o'clock?
Yeah. Just tell me a little bit about your husband.
Well, I was married, let's see, June, July, August, November. I was married 7 months. And when he got enlisted, and anyway, and when he went overseas, I went to New York, and he said to go up to the top of the Empire State Building and see if the Queen Mary was gone from the harbor. That meant he had left for overseas. So I did, cried all the way home. Anyway, that was a sad part of my life. And then by the time he got overseas and everything. He drove a tank. He was a staff sergeant in the commander's company tank. Anyway, he drove the company commander's tank, drove a tank. And I didn't hear from him for about a month and a half, and I thought every day I was going to get that letter saying that he had got killed in the service or something. Seeing things in the movies, in the newsreel, that's the only way you could see anything about what was going on. The newsreel they used to have, you used to go in the movies. You used to see all that. They were the first outfit to go across the Remagen Bridge into Berlin. his outfit. And I finally just wants to go into he said they got shelled on the bridge, the tanks. They didn't know if they were going to get across, but I guess they made it because he came home. He was overseas 2 years and 4 months. Long time. And when he came home, my son was over 2 years old. He was walking and talking, never got to see, never got to see him. He saw him when he was 4 months old, and that was the only time he saw him until he came home.
Did you
almost 3 years old, huh?
Did you move back?
Yeah, I was living at the farm when I had Jimmy, when I had my son.
Where is Jimmy now?
He lives on Marion Ave here.
Oh, he does?
Yeah. That's something that belongs to you, that little...
This is a battery that belongs to you. That's a used one. I think that's why at the beginning, remember?
Yeah.
So what does it mean to you to be Italian?
Wonderful. Best bringing up I ever had. My parents are the most wonderful people in the world. I don't know what else to tell you. My sisters are all so loving. We do everything for each other. We're always together. We do everything together, our family. And when my sister-in-law was sick, my brother John's wife, she said how happy she was to have a family like ours, to be like ours. Because she never had any sisters, my sister-in-law and I, only brothers.
What traditions do you try to keep? I know the cooking.
That's about all, I guess. I do everything the old-fashioned way. I don't do anything so modern. I'm not that much. Oh, these are my sister-in-law's. This is my nephew's daughter. Isn't she gorgeous? She ran from this Palm Beach. She lived in Florida. And this little girl here is Anthony Sassoni's daughter. She was adopted. That's her. These 3 kids are Bobby Sassoni's kids. My sister-in-law, Yali, she was an Angelini. That's my husband's sister. And these 3 kids and these 3 kids are her kids. Aren't they adorable?
Yeah. Do you have any grandchildren?
Do I? 2 beautiful grandchildren I have. One's 31, one's 32. My Marthy's going to be a doctor. He works in Brigham and Women's. My Marthy, getting married in June. And my granddaughter lives in Newburyport. She has her own condo, has a terrific job. She has a Mercedes car.
Do they keep any of the traditions going?
Well, my Lisa, when she was little, used to love to, when I'd make pasta and stuff, she used to love, her father used to call her little hands because she had to get her hands into everything. Anyway, she used to mix my meatballs. I'd put the stuff in and I'd make her mix the meatballs and stuff. But I don't think they do any of that. Those kids are both college graduates. My Marty's going to have his doctorate degree in April, and he's going to be a doctor. He's a physical therapist now. And my Lisa has a master's degree, but that's as high as she went. My Marty had almost a 4.0 average in college. She was very smart. Very proud of my grandchildren. Can't say enough of good things about them. I love them.
Do you get to see them much?
Oh, yeah. Oh, on holidays and stuff. They live in Boston, my God. And his girl that he's marrying is a nurse at Mass General. And you know those twins they separated that were joined in one heart? She was going to be an anesthesiologist. She assisted the anesthesiologist in the OR. She works in the operating room. Got a good job.
Amazing, huh?
Beautiful girl, wonderful girl, love her.
Would you like to add anything else?
No, not really. I
No?
think
Okay. Thank you. This is the